Hello, people. I'm back. Just trying this new background thing here. Maybe you'll think I'm in outer space. Something I wanted to give a shot here, give it a try. Just a little short video clip on here in the foundational securities, foundational documents regarding registration of birth. And just to clarify, our primary objective is to help people secure control. Right now, everyone's out of control, or everyone I know. Nothing more. We provide the information to go beyond the point of control, but that is not our emphasis here. Control is taking control is control coupled with understanding equals freedom. The next video we do here will be how to perfect a security interest to secure that control. We will do that in accordance with the rules. Otherwise, it is not binding on governments, courts, banks, and other commercial claimants. Just to clarify here, don't get your back up. We do not use their rules for our benefit, so there's no attachment in that sense. This video is about the foundational documents / securities. I get a lot of inquiries from people regarding the registration of birth documents, certificate of live birth, statement of live birth, and birth certificates. Mainly, how do I get hold of these? They do not provide certified copies. I cannot get a copy of the original registration. I cannot get a copy of the statement of birth. They do not provide birth certificates. What number do I use? A lot of inquiries like this. And I'm kind of surprised people should, if they're on this path and talk about birth certificates and registration documents, the first thing you should have done is gone in to read the legislation that authorized the registration of these events. Wealth of information in there, or that's what I did. I looked on the birth certificate when I first was informed of this 20 years ago, 21 years ago. It said Vital Statistics Act. So the first thing I did is I went to the Vital Statistics Act and I read the Vital Statistics Act and the regulations to get educated. It starts here, right? I'd want to know. And also application for birth certificates. I studied and scrutinized the application for these things to see what kind of information is there. And anyone on this path I would think should have done that already if you're talking about birth certificates, so on and so forth. If you haven't done that, I highly recommend that you do. Okay, this is from Ontario, Canada. Here we call it a statement of birth or a statement of live birth. Down below here, there's a box that is checked. Is it a still birth or is it a live birth? In the case here, it's a live birth, so this would be a statement of live birth. This is what they look like in Ontario, Canada. Again, this is a document filled out by hand, by mom or dad. Okay, and ultimately signed down here by mom, dad. So this document is the original document. This is for registering birth. This is a certified copy of an entry of birth. This is from United Kingdom. Okay, down here it talks about copyright and all that sort of stuff. Just ignore that. It's not relevant to our situation here. You'll see number up here, number down here. These are identifying numbers. Keep that in mind. Again, from England, certificate of birth. Just showing some different documentations here. And again, England, entry of birth. See, in England, I believe they put the information in what they call a general register. It's like a book. Again, if you do your studies, you can read up on these things and get educated if it's of interest, if you're in England or Scotland, perhaps in Ireland as well. So this here is an Ontario, Canada birth certificate. Okay, and the name on here, the name is exactly the same on this document as it appeared on the original statement of live birth that I showed you previously. Okay, you'll see signatures, seals, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the birth certificate. So just keep those documents in mind as we're talking through here. Now, if you look at the registration of birth document or registration of birth coupled with you use the birth certificate as personal identification, gives the holder, if you look at it, that the registration of birth coupled with your use of the birth certificate or whatever is personal identification. If you look at it, that it gives the holder of the registration title to your body, title to your productivity, your living, so on and so forth. Can you not see the significance of taking control of that foundational document / security, at least for your sake and that of your children? It is like they presume to own us, our children, our bodies, our property. Do this, do that, or else. Like when we were young, children with mom and dad in their home under their authority. Well, securing that registration by way of perfected security interest overcomes all these presumptions. It's how you're taking control here. And the basis of taking control revolves around the registration of the event of your birth. If you are on this path, you should have looked into what the records, certificates are available respecting registration of births and how to acquire them or certify copies thereof. If you haven't done that, I highly recommend you do. Just part of the education, part of the due diligence. Do not contact us about that. Contact the government that registered the birth. You want to get it from the horse's mouth, right? Lots of information on the internet for education. It is best to do your own due diligence. You hear me speak here a lot of the Personal Property Security Act, PPSA, the Securities Transfer Act, again, Ontario, Canada legislation, Article 8 and Article 9. As I speak of these, as I am familiar with these, I'm not familiar with how they do things in other countries. Some folks in other countries, as I'm hearing, may have trouble locating corresponding legislation, meaning what's your corresponding Personal Property Security Act or Securities Transfer Act or Securities Act? What is it? Where you're at. So when I first got onto this path, everything was coming out of the United States. So I started printing off all kinds of United States stuff. Then I give myself a scratch. But just a second, I'm in Canada. I don't think their courts are going to recognize American stuff here. And sure enough, I searched and found out that that's the case, or it'll create a problem if I do. So I said, well, I need to Canadianize it. So I would look at the American stuff and I would search until I found the Canadian equivalent. I'd use keywords and stuff to locate. And I was able to cross-reference all of it. And I'm sure everyone out there are fairly sure others can do that in other jurisdictions as well. So anyhow, this might help you out here for those people in those countries who don't have a Personal Property Security Act specifically called Personal Property Securities Act or Securities Transfer Act. And it is this: if you have, excuse me, if you have banks in your country, they register security interests every day. What legislation, act, code do they use to do that? Find out. That'll help you. Banks also deal in securities. No ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. What legislation is in place respecting securities? Again, look at your banking. You're dealing at it every day. Make some inquiries. Leave no stone unturned. You have to do some due diligence here, and we're not going to do that for you. Again, if you're on this path, there's certain things that you should be, I highly recommend. I would think that people just be automatic that you want to do these things. You'd want to know. I'd want to know, not just take what I hear from other people. I used to be on this path early on. Everybody's going through the dictionaries on the meaning of birth. Well, you got to look to the legislation because that's what they're going by, the meaning of birth from the Vital Statistics Act, for example, which is our Ontario, Canada legislation. Birth means. Doesn't mean ships or anything like that, like people are looking at dictionaries. So you want to know, you want to have the knowingness. I want to have the knowingness, so I go to the source. And there are two documents or events of importance here. The registration of live birth, or by whatever title it is known where you're at, whatever country that is. This being the document / information mom handed over or granted to the government / registrar to register the event of the birth. So something went from mom's hands, got a piece of paper, filled it out, and went from mom to government. Follow the order of events here. I showed you the Canadian version in our first video, and again in this video here of what that registration about birth document looks like. We call it a statement of birth or statement of live birth. The government has the original, and they're not going to let it go. And I don't care that they don't want to let it go. They've got it. They don't want to give it back. They give nothing in exchange. So there's the trust, the first trust. So that document went from mom hands to the government. This doc has a number on it or other identifier affixed to it. Look at the number as if a VIN number or serial number for a car. The number identifies the collateral. In the case of a bank, it lends money for a car. So it's going to list the car down in the collateral description on a lien statement. It's going to put down make, model, serial number, or VIN number. Right? Now, at the end of that transaction, does the bank have possession of the car? No. But it's got a registered security interest that with make, model, serial number identifies that car. So if the debtor, so-called, does not pay, they know they can find that car and go seize that property. course, here we're not talking about cars, we're talking about documentation, but I'll get to that. So do you need to have possession of the car to identify it? Absolutely not. Think, people, this is not rocket science. Then there is the birth certificate or extract from birth registration or birth record. That document went from the hands of government, and eventually ends up in your hands. For the government to issue a birth certificate or a certified copy of a record, it must have a record or information from which to extract the information you see on the birth certificate or certified copy. They don't just whip these things up. It's got to come from somewhere. That information may be a copy of the original registration or entry into a general register. That may be all you get. I mean, we talk about statement of live birth and birth certificates here, but some jurisdictions may only have one document. They may not have something called the birth certificate. They may not have something called the statement of live birth. So they might not have both. Might only be the one. These are things you want to find out. But what we're talking about here is primarily for security and control is the original registration that mom filled out and handed that to government. That's the key one right there to start with. So now I want to go over that particular document, what we call the foundational security, as collateral. I want to bring that in now as collateral. Specifically, the identification of it. See, some people say they can't get it. Well, it doesn't matter if you can't get it, as long as you can identify it. So I said, you don't have to have possession of the car to have a claim to the car or have a security interest. The main thing to comprehend here is what is you want to identify the registration of birth in the custody of government, one way or another. They have the original. We're not talking about this one here, the copy you get in your hands if you get one. We're talking about the one that the government has. They have custody of it. That's what we're talking about here. So the main thing to comprehend here is you want to identify the registration of birth in the custody of the government. Why? Because we list it as collateral, and you want to be sure you identify the collateral, like a car, make, model, color, serial number. The bank will put that on their security agreement. They'll put it on the lien filing, so the world knows now that the bank has an interest in that property. Specifically identified, no confusion. There's only one car with that VIN number on it, right? There's only one registration of birth with a registration number, or a file number, some kind of number on there to identify that document that you're going to list as collateral. So we listed as collateral, and you want to be sure to identify the collateral. You do not necessarily need an actual certified copy of that registration/entry, although I would do my best to get a certified copy. It is a must that the collateral, whatever it is sufficiently identified. Again, in the collateral description. For example, statement of live birth, number, blah, 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 blah. You need to identify the birth record somehow, one way or another. Do we need to have possession of car to identify it? No, as I said before, no, of course not. Make, model, serial number, and color are very helpful to identify a car, to identify who holds the security interest in the car, the property. Sometimes even a photograph may suffice. Of course, here we're talking about registration of live birth, the foundational security. Think, people, this is not rocket science when it comes to identify the statement of live birth, the foundational security as collateral. Name, date of registration or other number that's on that document that's identifying the collateral. Specifically the document, the security, not the name, not the number, the actual registration of live birth that went from mom's hands into government, into their government's custody. So again, it's like they're in possession of the car. Okay, well, you want to secure your interest in that car, you need to register, the lien, make, model, color, serial number. There, now you've got a security interest in the car someone's holding. So the same thing with the statement of live birth or the birth registration document, whatever it's called where you're at. Somebody has that, received it from mom. Okay, it's kind of a name on there. It's kind of as far as I know, they all have registration dates. They'll have some kind of number on there. May not be called a registration number, might be called a file number, but it's going to be some kind of number on that document there to isolate it from all the other ones. That's the number you want to have. So you don't actually need to have actual possession of a certified copy of the registration of birth is the point I'm trying to make. Some people just don't seem to think, oh, if I can't get a copy of that, I'm dead in the water. No, you're not. And I understand that there's a lack of understanding here because those people haven't obtained the Reclaim Your Securities information. They want to make sure that before they do, they have the access to the proper documentation. What's the point? It is my understanding, I'm getting this from the United Nations Handbook on Civil Registration. I believe it's UNF 75 or 71. And it's the right of every child to have the birth registered. So in all these countries that partake in that, they're all registering the births. I'm not sure of any countries anymore that are not. But in any case, if you're in a birth where they register births, they register births. There's a foundational security there somewhere. So again, I'm going to clarify this. You do not have to have actual possession. In other words, I don't need to have actual possession of the statement of a certified copy of the statement of birth. As long as I got enough particulars to sufficiently identify it as collateral in a lien filing and who holds it, that's all I need. Okay. Now, one other aspect to taking control, although at this point here, if we stop right where I just left off in the video there, so you've identified the collateral and properly sufficiently to identify the collateral, name, date of birth, registration number, actual copy of the document. You could have an actual copy of the document. People doing the power of attorney process don't get it. It's like, okay, if you haven't got a number, then attach a copy of the birth registration document. So you just want the people to know what you're talking about. What are we talking about here? Like I say, a lot of emphasis on things I say and on the process rather than the understanding. And if you just take the time of the understanding, once the understanding comes in, and it all starts to make sense. Last thing I guess I want to discuss here briefly is the birth certificate. Again, I get in some countries, it seems that they may not get an actual birth certificate. So if by properly identifying the foundational security and identifying that on a security agreement and on a lien filing, you've secured that. There's your control. That's your control. You now have control. You've got the highest registered lien interest, security interest on that security, right? You're the sole contributor. No one else can have that. Not possible. Again, listen to the Renewing of the Mind our video on YouTube, Renewing the Mind, one of the more recent ones. Very good, that audio. And so the birth certificate, as I talked in the setting the foundation part 1 there, in other videos, it has to be endorsed. Now people are a little confused about that. There's indoors and there's endorse. If you want to negotiate negotiable instruments, you endorse them, do you not? Like you endorse the back of a check, like pay to Steve, and Steve might endorse it, pay to Connie, and eventually Connie takes it to the bank to deposit it. So these are on the back side. The front side, when you do that on the front side, which is an endorsement, has a different effect on that. In other words, if you get a bill in the mail, at that point in time, it's a worthless piece of paper. Now, what you do next determines the outcome. You're going to accept it for value, and if so, what markings are you going to put on there? This is the endorsement I'm talking about now. You don't flip it over and endorse it on the back. There's nothing to negotiate here. It's just a piece of paper with some different words and then numbers on it. So the endorsement goes on the face and it converts. There's a conversion taking place here coupled with your signature. Remember, this is the source of the credit here. This is so you're going to turn that piece of paper into a piece of credit item, more or less. That's what the acceptance for value is doing there on the endorsement. So again, that's why we endorse the birth certificate. So really, I think I'll leave I think I already touched on the purpose of the birth certificate, so I really don't need to get that here. The main thing I wanted to touch on here was helping people to locate the foundational security, what it's called, make it clear to people that you don't actually need to have possession of a certified copy of it. You're never going to get the original, so forget about that. If you can't get a certified copy of it, you don't need to, as long as you got numbers to identify it somehow. That's all that matters. Just like the bank is not in possession of the car, but they got the numbers to identify it. So there's a breach in the contract, the debtor doesn't pay, they can go take the car. They can say, yep, this is the one. Make, model, serial number. Bailiff looks and says, yep, serial number. Bank has a registered interest. Take the car. Not rocket science. And so like I say, next video, I'm going to get into a little more detail here between the Securities Transfer Act and the Personal Property Securities legislation. This is where it's talking about taking control now, specifically control, specifically, not making this up. And again, UCC Article 8 and 9, specifically control and how to perfect the security interest in that control in accordance with the rules. Not making stuff up. You're not going to do stuff that sounds right. We're going to make up our own way of perfecting a security interest. No, 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 no. You want a security interest that's recognized and binding, then we got to do it by the rules. And again, we're not benefiting from the rules. Remember, we're not really in there. We're doing stuff, yes, but we're not in there. It's no more than the CEO of General Motors is on the hook for what General Motors does, but he's got to be there as the captain and sign paperwork, right, for the company. So whatever the CEO does for General Motors under some sort of legislation, the CEO is not going to benefit the company. It's the same thing here with our estates and our strawman and stuff, all these fictional beings. It's what they really are. Remember I said early on, these are clone images of reality. You listen to that 55-minute Renew Your Mind audio, same thing. They've cloned everything. There's reality, and then there's the clone, the fictional stuff. And so, and I got that from Marcus. I love it. Fictional beings. Your state's a fictional being. Your straw man's a fictional being. Everything in Wonderland is a fictional being. Yeah, so anyhow, that's about it. So all is not lost if you cannot get an actual certified copy of the registration of birth document or birth certificate, whatever they call it. Just why I say people should be doing their own due diligence in the country where they're at, or where the country was. You might be in a different country now than the birth took place. So go back to the birthplace, the country where the birth took. Was registered, and that's where you get your education. So just to be clear here, what we're actually securing is the account. If you go back and read the uniform securitization scheme, it's explained very nicely in there that what Bill put together, the birth certificate scam. It's at our blog. Just click on the uniform securitization scheme button and you'll see it there and read it. How they, every time they're doing these things, they're creating an account. There's, all accounts have a number, just like in a phone book. You look, there could be multiple John Smiths, but they all have a different phone number. It's all different accounts, all the same name, but a different number. That's what we emphasize: name and number, different account. So that's the foundational. So you call that the foundational account if you want, or the securities account. And that's, so that's actually what we're securing here, where we're securing the primary collateral. Yeah, that's the ultimate objective, is that account. That's all we have claim to, really. So, and that gives us, like I say, control, not only just over the account, but of yourself, your body, your property, the whole situation. At that point, once you have control of that foundational security. But I just wanted to make sure it's clearish here that it's actually an account. You'll see again with that in the uniform securitization scheme, how the account's created from the birth. After a birth, after the event of the registration of the birth, how they create an account in that process. So that's what's being secured. So just want to make sure you got that in here. And once again, I'm going to get my spaceship and go tour around outer space out here. So anyhow, I hope that information helps a little bit for people, and love you. God bless. Yeah, we went from winter to summer here fairly quickly. Went from cool to hot. It is what it is. I love you. God bless. And we will talk to you soon when we do. And like I say, stay tuned for the next video. I've got it all scripted out there. Just got to find the time to do it. Thank you so much. God bless. Love you. Ciao.